I know Deputy Mayor Herman is coming, Mr. Davis is still out of town, and I would expect Committee Member Engel, if she can join us, she will. Our Administrator, Patrick Weary, is right over there, so for any complaints, you can bypass the Township Committee and just email Mr. Weary directly. So welcome to our fourth community meeting on the movie theater redevelopment area in the village. Before I turn it over to Mr. Greigel, our planner, I just want to let you know that while there was a contract for purchase of the movie theater building, that sale has not been completed, it has fallen through, and it is not under contract anymore. So the property owner. I didn't know that it would be a pause time, but yes, so the property owner is, as a private property owner does, he is looking for either a tenant or a purchaser, but just so you know, I wanted you to be aware of that. And now we're gonna have Paul Greigel, our planner. You can give a hand for Paul. So Paul is going to kind of go over the revisions, the process that we've been through thus far, and also kind of give you an update on some of the things that have changed from the last plan, or the last version of the plan. So we did, in the meantime, since the last meeting, we got official input from the Historic Preservation Commission. Since the downtown is a designated historic district, we got input from the Maplewood Village Alliance, which is the special improvement district that manages the village, and also, anybody else on this thing? Film Society, yep, Maplewood Film Society, and so Paul has been given all those things over the course of the last several months. We also consulted with an attorney who specializes in historic preservation and issues that come with that to kind of guide us as to who has powers over demolition review and things like that, so that we could be clear on the roles of the Village Alliance versus the HPC and Township. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Greigel. I think that's your not enough slack, so I'll give it to you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here again. Paul Greigel from the firm of Phillips Price, Greigel, Lady Keller, planning and real estate consultants. For those of you who have been here at the meetings before, nice to see you again. We've been advising the township on this project for a couple of years now at this point, as well as in the past on a number of other redevelopment and other planning projects throughout the township. My goal this evening, as the Mayor mentioned, is to give an overview of, for those who are not familiar with the process or the site, what the context is that we're dealing with, both in terms of the physical setting of the redevelopment area, as well as the way the redevelopment process works, and look ahead to the next steps in the process. And the most important part, though, is I'm not going to talk too much ultimately. It's more to hear all of you, anyone who wants to speak up, ask questions, provide comments, complaints. Yes, we do have a co-reporter here tonight, so we'll make sure we run this in a structured manner. Mayor's been very good at that in the past, so she'll be out there in the audience making sure it's run in an orderly fashion, but we do want to make sure everyone has a chance to speak up if there's anything on your mind about this plan, process, or anything else related to the redevelopment. So in terms of the setting, many of you are familiar today from the prior meetings, but for those who are not, we need a refresher because it's actually been almost a year since the last community meeting. The redevelopment area is in Maplewood Village. It's a key section of town, obviously, where you have the movie theater site, as well as the former Bank of America and certain other properties abutting there. Total area of 2.14 acres, fronting on Maplewood Avenue, but also with some frontage on Inwood Place, Duran Road, and Woodland. Just to provide you aerial context here. Again, the train station and Middleton Square are to the bottom, if you will, of the extreme, and the theater is in the middle, and that's the area. How have we gotten here? So the redevelopment process has been in accordance with the New Jersey Local Redevelopment and Housing Law. This is a state statute that sets forth procedures for these types of redevelopment projects. So what's been done so far is the Township Committee authorized an area in need of redevelopment investigation. This is back almost 2 years ago now in 2023. That is essentially the designation via the planning board and the Township Committee that the properties qualify under certain criteria for an area needed redevelopment designation. In process right now, we have the redevelopment plan that's been going through a number of iterations, again, starting almost 2 years ago at this point. Redevelopment plan is essentially new development regulations for a property or a series of properties. So it regulates uses, height, setbacks, parking requirements, design, all types of other standards. And looking to the future, we'll go into a bit more detail on this later. If and when that redevelopment plan is adopted, it's a law that's adopted by the Township Committee. The governing body, the Township Committee, has the ability to designate one or more redevelopers for properties within the area. And at that point, they would have the ability to go before the planning board to present more detailed plans. Again, think of a redevelopment plan as more of a broader blueprint or for the larger area, but there'll be more detailed plans that need to be reviewed and subject to public comment at a later time. Just to recap the process, so again, we've been here twice before in the Woodland, back on February 29th of 2024 and September 24th of that year. There was another meeting in March of 2024 at the Municipal Building. At those meetings, for those who were here before, we again went through some initial ideas and feedback, presented a draft plan back almost a year ago, which now has been refined based on, as was mentioned, by feedback from various entities. So since the time of that last meeting, last September, I met as the consultant with the Maplewood Village Alliance. We had a meeting to go over the plan in the area to discuss this project, as well as the Historic Preservation Commission has weighed in. The Maplewood Village Alliance again sent more written comments. Maplewood Film Society and various members of the public have also provided feedback. We've also, of course, listened to what people had to say in the prior community meetings as well. So jumping into the document, the redevelopment plan, this is just everything that's in there. It's been available on the township's website. I'm not going to go through every single page of here this evening. And there's actually a lot that has not changed. So for example, this overview section on page 7 talks about the purpose of the plan. It's to provide, as I mentioned, a framework for potential redevelopment of this area, which will promote vibrant, inviting, and transit-oriented development that complements the existing pedestrian-oriented nature of Maplewood Village. So that's, a pretty broad statement. We get into more detail with the vision for preserving the area, the local features there, and adding complementary new development, which will help invest in this area. And it's again trying to meet the objectives that many of you have for the type of development you want to see. One thing that has been added since the last meeting, based on feedback from the Maplewood Village Alliance, is a series of redevelopment plan goals. And these were essentially drafted by the MVA and presented to us as the consultants, the Township Committee, and the Township Administrator. And based upon review, so these make a lot of sense. They really hit the nail on the head with some guiding principles for the redevelopment area, the redevelopment project. So the first one is high quality architecture. Contextually appropriate, visually compatible, and consistent in scale and character. Second one, thoughtful placemaking. Ground floor to promote vibrant, human-oriented public space, including a contiguous, vibrant, and varied, small-scale retail street wall at grade. Again, getting into more planner-type terms, to basically say to continue what we have already in the village. Storefronts along the sidewalks, active spaces that invite people in and provide activity. Green infrastructure and sustainable design is the next one. And lastly, carefully preserve historically significant architecture. In particular, we talk about the bank building and movie theater facades. There are also then redevelopment plan objectives, which go into more detail. These are unchanged since the prior version, but they deal with, again, I'm not going to read everything verbatim here. This is available on the township website, but they're broken into different categories. The first one being character, respecting the existing character of Maplewood Village in the land use context, while optimizing its value to the township. And this is an important thing to remember with regard to redevelopment. The whole purpose of doing this is not to just keep the buildings you have there necessarily as they are, but to potentially allow for development that can fund improvements, whether it's in public spaces, to provide parking, to provide new residential opportunities, new uses, preserve a theater, you name it. There's a lot of things that people want to see here. It doesn't happen for free, so we're trying to strike that balance of allowing investment in this area. But there's also then guidelines for doing so. Basically trying to preserve the special character of Maplewood Village, its historic character. Many of the things that we've talked about previously during this process. In terms of uses, I'll list these out in a minute, but basically promoting a mix of uses. The zoning now, or the regulations for development in Maplewood Village allow for retail stores, restaurants, services, all types of, plus residential upper stories and other types of uses as well. We're looking to continue that and to add some additional uses to the mix potentially. But the overall objective is to support downtown anchors, including a theater space. That's one we're really looking to make sure is preserved and provided, as well as a grocery store. Also providing for new housing options, including affordable housing as part of it, and a range of other types of uses, including retail, entertainment, recreation, and others. In terms of design, looking to, again, not go crazy in terms of changing what works within the village, but recognizing you need to allow for some additional height over one-story buildings in some cases now, filling in existing parking lots, that type of thing. So the idea is to allow new and expanded buildings that are similar in scale to what is permitted now and what exists currently within Maplewood Village. The idea also with building height is to step it back from the street, to not have a wall that just goes straight up for 5 stories, but to allow for 35-foot development with additional height step back further from the street wall. We're also promoting sustainable development and site design, preservation of historic facades, as I mentioned, and trying to add to the informal and formal gathering places within this section of the village. Circulation, this is a difficult one. We've talked about in prior meetings, balancing the fact that this is a site in the downtown that's very walkable. It's inviting people to arrive by different modes, including transit, bicycle, as well as cars. Parking, people complain about, but there's, again, the debate we've had previously here, more parking, less parking, do we need to provide parking on site? Right now, we're trying to promote a reasonable balance with limited amount of parking for new uses within the area. And then enhancing pedestrian and bicycle safety, providing for better loading facilities should there be any retail or other larger scale uses. Okay, in terms of permitted uses, I mentioned this before. This is, again, unchanged from previously, so the idea is to allow all of these uses, and you have to provide one or more of these along street level on Maplewood Avenue. So theaters, performing arts centers, art galleries, grocery stores, other retail businesses, retail services, but not including hair and nail salons, restaurants, but not fast food restaurants, and microbreweries, craft distilleries, and wineries. Only on one of these, so there's definitions in the plan as well. One term I mentioned called retail services is pretty broad. We've had discussions here previously, and in my planning practice, I've seen in downtowns, the trend is to have not just typical brick and mortar retail, because unfortunately, with competition from online shopping and other ways to buy things, it's not as easy nowadays to make a living doing that, but experiential retail and experiences, so whether it's restaurants and dining, but things such as entertainment, recreation type facilities, amusement, such as facilities, arcades. Actually, there are a few towns in New Jersey that have arcades in their downtowns nowadays. So Yestercase is one example of Westfield and Somerville. Studios for dance and arts, that type of thing, music, gymnastics. So there's a very broad category here. We're trying to make sure there's options for property owners to put in different uses that make sense. What's important is that there's also limitations on uses where they're located, so you have to have the active space for retail, services, restaurants, etc. on the ground floor. Other uses are permitted, but only on the upper level or back from the street, are multifamily residential, offices, co-working, or hotel. So those are, again, uses that are permitted, but you can't put their, other than a lobby, you can't put things down on the ground level, put just residential units along the street. Any residential development also with 5 or more units needs to provide a 20% set aside of affordable housing on site. Okay, in terms of changes to the plan, we received a lot of feedback, and there's changes that were made previously in the process. In the most recent set of changes, they're relatively limited. We did hear a lot of comments, and with discussion with the seed, the entrepreneurship and economic development of the township committee, with their feedback, with the input from the township attorney, township administrator, and myself, weighing whether to include certain changes. So some were added to the plan, others were not. So some of these, again, it came out of the various discussions amongst these various groups I mentioned, and other ones coming in from the MVA, from the Film Society and others. As I mentioned before, we added redevelopment plan goals, and then also just some changes in the 3 broad categories. In terms of design regulations, so this is the really fine details about what size windows should be, what building materials, all kinds of things like that. Maplewood Village Alliance actually has really strong standards currently. And we had originally incorporated some of them and modified them. Feedback we got from MVA was just refer to them, just let them stay in place. Don't try to mess with what's working. So that was something that we did, was to essentially just refer back to them, and we added them to the appendix of the plan, so it's clear to any property owner or developer or member of the public what those regulations are. There were some minor changes with requirements that were kind of duplicative. I can go into detail on that, but essentially where things were mentioned in more than one section that didn't need to be repeated. We also enhanced the regulations for design and ground floor uses beyond Maplewood Village Alliance standards, such as accentuated building entries, and making sure that accessory residential amenities are not permitted. So that's gyms, co-working spaces from the residential buildings, facility, laundry rooms, those types of things can't be on the ground floor. If there's a residential building, they need to be upper floors or hidden within the building to the back. A number of changes pertain to historic preservation. The Historic Preservation Commission, or HPC, weighed in a number of times and gave us a number of comments. So we clarified that commission's review procedures, as well as what the planning board's review process is. We'll make sure it's clear that our redeveloper can request an informal meeting with the HPC to get input and feedback on any plans that they may have. It's clarified that demolition review is by the Maplewood Village Alliance, not the HPC. There was a specific comment that was brought up previously that we originally mentioned that erroneously in the presentation. So to make that clear, that's the MPA's duty and obligation. Certain sections are reorganized with regards to historic preservation. And then the last two are regarding Maplewood Village being, and the redevelopment area in particular, being part of a national and state designated historic district. And that all the existing buildings and properties in the redevelopment area are considered contributing resource to its historic significance. The only one exception is the small parking lot behind the theater where there's no building, it's just a lot that is not contributing any historic resources. But the remaining buildings, the existing ones, plus any additions to them, such as the bank, all contribute to the historic area. Lastly, we made some changes with regards to legal information and procedures based on feedback from the township attorney. Requiring redevelopment, this is important, that the redevelopment law I talked about before gives municipalities the ability to dictate what to be built, but also to enter into contractual agreements with property owners or redevelopers to say, okay, you want to build there, show us what you're going to do, what will it look like, and then we can put timelines in place. So I know previously Maplewood's had experience with a number of projects like that. I remember many years ago, before I was even involved, one where a redeveloper did not meet its time frame for taking certain actions, was de-designated, if I recall correctly, on the police station site. Remember that correctly. I believe that was the case there, but that certainly is something that can be done. It's an obligation that's put on a property owner or redeveloper to meet certain deadlines, to meet financial agreements, that type of thing. We reiterated that condemnation is not permitted as part of this process. This is a non-condemnation redevelopment area. Eminent domain, as the taking of private property by the government for a public purpose, cannot be done through this process. And lastly, we clarified that simply jargon, what are called D variances, basically uses or excessive heights and other things that have to do with the zoning board of adjustment. That cannot be, they cannot weigh in on that. The plan must be amended for major changes such as much larger building height, different kinds of uses, excessive density, floor area ratio, that type of thing. Those types of variances cannot be granted by the zoning board. Okay, with that, again, I said I didn't want to talk too much tonight, but I'll be happy to answer questions in more detail. But right now, I want to just go through the next steps before we can turn to the mayor to get the public comment. The township committee, we've seen there's some members here tonight, but there'll also the others who are not will get feedback, I'm sure, through this process, through the reporter, through the write-ups on this, and our report back to them. The township committee will discuss the draft plan as it's currently written, and then we'll decide what to do with it. Most likely, next step, refer to the planning board for its review. At that point, the planning board will provide comments. Statutorily, the planning board is a separate entity, has the ability to weigh in on consistency of the master plan and make any other recommendations for changes to the plan that it wants. Then the planning board will send its comments back to the township committee. At that point, if the members believe the plan is ready or want to either modify it to do so or keep it as is, introduce it as an ordinance. This would be a law that would replace the existing zoning. So follow the ordinance process was introduced, notice to the public hearing to be held where all of you can come out and say yes, no, change it, whatever you want. You can make your comments at the public hearing at that time. Beyond, so that's just to make it clear that before there's even this framework or blueprint in place, there's a number of other steps that need to happen and another chance, at least one chance, if not more, for public comment on a redevelopment plan. If and when a redevelopment plan is adopted, the next steps will include in the future that destination for redevelopment, as I just mentioned, negotiation of a redevelopment agreement, and then the planning board gets another chance to review the more detailed plans, the site plans, the building designs, the parking and circulation layouts, the pedestrian and bicycle facilities. All that stuff will be shown in detailed plans to the planning board who would have to approve it. Of course, we already used to throw in here regarding the neighborhood of those plans as you've seen in others as I mentioned previously. So that's again the big picture of where we are in this process. So tonight, we hope to walk out of here hearing anything you want to tell us about what's been presented so far in the plan, things that you want to see changed, things that you like, anything along those lines. So with that, Mayor, I think it's time to turn the mic back to you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks, Paul. And no, he gave a very comprehensive update of where we're at. So now's time for us to get input from you again. So is there anyone who has questions for Mr. Bregel or just wants to make a comment? Sure. Since you all know.
Hi, I'm Rhoda Costello. My name is Rhoda Costello. I live on Maplewood Avenue. I've been here for 28 years. I'm just trying to kind of reconcile what we're seeing there with what we understand as the businesses. I feel like this is abstract, and then there is the concrete. There's the movie theater. There's Ani Ram. There's Bill and Harry's. There's all these other businesses that have been there for a very long time. I'm just not understanding how the redevelopment plan, which is again a little bit higher level and kind of just lays out parameters, impacts the actual future of those businesses and the property. For example, first of all, it looks like the first doors is included. The realtor is not in that red outline.
That's correct, yes. If I want to jump in, if you want me to answer, yes, that's. I can show you another map showing the lots. So the corner property is shown is not perfect. proposed redevelopment boundaries. So follow this first and jump back to the aerial. So then going that way, it's the strip of stores, it's the billet areas, the one-story brick building, then it's the theater building, including Roman Gourmet Fish Market in the front, also Kingswood Greenway Markets, and then the bank building on the corner. And then that wraps around, and the only other one, the Bergdorf Center in the back is also included there. So I'll switch to the aerial so you can see that.
So the Bergdorf Center was not included in the, historic, we need to maintain the facade. Like, are we only maintaining the facade of the movie theater, or?
There's no reason, we didn't mean to exclude it, that's a good point. It is public, partly because it's publicly owned, the township owns it already, so any change to it would not be from a private developer. But that's a clarification that can certainly be added if the township committee wants to make that explicit. But that's part of it.
Well, can you just go into her first question with regard to what happens to the existing businesses? I mean, this is a zoning document, basically, yeah. So you want to speak to that?
Sure. So a couple things. One, I mentioned just to reiterate, non-condemnation. So no one, the township can't just go say we want to take any of the properties and hand it over to someone else or to pave the way for redevelopment. What would happen in the future, though, would be if there's a plan adopted, any property owner or developer that purchases a property would have the ability to redevelop. The tenants that are there now would still have the rights, of course. There's nothing in this plan to take out any of the existing businesses. It's not intended to try to displace anyone. The idea is, in fact, there's language in there specifically heard from the property owner from the one strip of stores that there's no interest in her view in being part of the plan, and that's fine. But the property isn't included, so down the road, if the property sells, she changed her mind. Just not to pick on one example, but essentially, it's going to be up to property owners to decide how to move forward. The township will not be involved in saying you stay or you go.
Right, and then there's also, this just lays out the uses that are permitted, most of which already exist in this plan.
Right.
Really hard and into all of these meetings, and I think the important part was that everybody was breathing a sigh of relief that there's a reprieve from having the building sold and having the property turned into 100 units of housing, which was what was speculated was going to happen. I think it's pretty clear from the first meeting that the majority of people want the theater preserved in some way and some kind of theater space, not suggested, but required. And this is something that was done recently in Montclair with the Bellevue Theater, which when the township did their planning development, required, not suggested, but required 50% of the space be used for the theater. And they also preserved that historic building. And talking about the historic nature of the downtown, that whole building was designed by a very famous architect and should really be part of the historical preservation of the town. And why can't that be done here as it was done?
My understanding in Montclair is that there was basically a large donation to buy the building, and it was in the plan. I would love for people to find it. Yeah. Here. I don't want to argue. I'm just saying.
I just want to point out that we have a would like to remind you all that we have a lot of theater people and movie people and famous people that have come out of Columbia High School that somehow, I think we could reach out to the Jason Alexanders and the Scissors that all have occupied Maplewood and gone to the Maplewood movie theater growing up. I think somehow we could reach out to these people and see if Hollywood or the theater community would like to get together and make this happen for us.
What I would say to that is, again, the township committee is going to consider the feedback here, and this is part of the process is to get the word out about what's going on here. So it's usually governments don't get in the business of trying to go solicit donations or groups such as that. But again, my understanding from Montclair is more of a grassroots effort and a large organization that already had some momentum. So I'm sure some of you are going to tell me more about this. But if that's the case, then you can coordinate with a group that does this. That's not precluded by any means. The second thing is important, is that a redevelopment plan, even though it's a law that's adopted, it can change. It can change between now and when it's adopted, after the fact. If something comes up that says, we've got a great opportunity, and someone's willing to pony up the money or has a great plan, the township committee, I have a feeling, would be very receptive to hearing that and modifying it to be more strict. The problem we have right now is we have private owners, no one that's come forward to say this thus far. We're allowing for that kind of use, we're allowing for a mix of uses, but again, now's the time to get the word out and try to impress upon your governing body to listen to you about that.
Well, that makes sense.
Hi, thank you. I just wanted to pick up on this conversation because I do have some background. Yes, I'm Angela Matusik from the Maplewood Film Society. Thank you very much for organizing this meeting. It's a busy time of year. I know some of our town committee couldn't make it themselves, but a lot of other people couldn't make it. My partner in crime, Lisa Cohen, is trying to come, but she's not here yet. I also just wanted to say that, we acknowledge we had this meeting last year. It does feel a little bit like Groundhog Day for some of us. It's hard to believe it was almost a year ago that we gathered here to hear about this plan. And since then, as you mentioned, the Maplewood Film Society has been trying very much to have an input and have an effect on this plan. We have not had much success. We created a petition that asked for 3 things. We wanted improved transparency, so we could see what, if any, tax breaks were being given to developers. We asked for more historic oversight. Yes, we were able to have that because the Historic Preservation Commission hired a lawyer and they made it happen. So bravo. And the third thing is that we asked that the Maplewood Redevelopment Plan, which as you see here covers 2 acres, including our beloved historic theater, that it include a space for culture and community, not within the 2 acres, but within the theater building itself, which is one of our core anchors. We've been talking to architects and other developers who have confirmed that there's much more of a story to be told in revitalizing something, a boomerang, than to tear something down. And that could be Maplewood's story. We gave the town committee signed petitions, over 1,500 names. We gave them 500 comments. Many of them are here today and will be speaking to these comments. But I just want to talk a moment about Montclair. It is not a fantasy. Yes, they have some rich people who were involved to own the building and bought the building. That's what we all are hoping for here. But I'm just going to summarize what their redevelopment plan said. At the beginning of their redevelopment plan, what their goals were. It said, local theaters are becoming extinct, the victim and proliferation of alternative entertainment magnified by COVID. We all know this to be true. The purpose of the Bellevue Theater redevelopment plan is to preserve both the movie theater use and its historic building. This requires a modern definition of movie theater that expands beyond the use of just movie screenings. To compete with new media formats, the definition of a movie theater must be expanded to include a place for community gatherings and special events. In addition, multiple uses should be permitted within the building to provide a broader range of income sources to support the local movie theater operation. Up front, nice and clear, they say it can be done, it can be done, And that's what we are hoping to see here in Maplewood.
Okay, thank you. I could pretty much guarantee that if somebody came up with the money, we would be happy to move in that regard. And as Paul has stated numerous times, a movie theater is not precluded. And as far as transparency, take a little umbrage to that because this is our fourth community meeting and there has been no agreement, there's been no redeveloper established. So we're as transparent as a government gets.
And just follow up very briefly because of mentioning of pilots or payment of taxes. That can only happen if and when a redevelopment plan is adopted in the first place. It grants the ability to the township committee, but that would have to go through a whole separate process. So to this point, there has been, it can be nothing with regard to tax breaks or anything else for the properties. Again, that's something that down the road will be considered. We gotta get through this process first and get to the point where you even have a redevelopment or a project to deal with.
Steve Finn, Maplewood. This question is for Mayor Adams. What will you be looking for in terms of selecting a developer once the redevelopment plan is put into place? I mean, has the town committee been talking about, like, what kind of criteria you're looking for in terms of choosing a developer, one that's maybe more, unique focus as opposed to somebody like you might see in like downtown Jersey City, where it has developments for that. Looking at the local character and some of the
I'll speak briefly to it. We are wide open-minded on what redeveloper would come and we would designate as redeveloper. It's largely dependent on who owns the building, right? Who buys the building or leases the building. And then that conversation happens along with what their plans are. When in conversation, I can tell you that other redevelopment areas in Maplewood have not exceeded, say, 60 residential units per acre. And that's something that I don't think I or my colleagues choose or have any desire to go higher than. So the comment before about 100 units per acre was nothing that we were talking about. And until we know who's proposing what, we don't know what we will think. Of course, background, ability to finance and to be a solid developer would be part of it, but it's too much of an abstract to really give an opinion on it. So, I'm sorry, he raised his hand before. Here we go,
Hi, I'm Zach Renier. I've been resident here for 17 years. I live on Soldier Place. I have a letter from Thomas C. Lehman, who is the son of the man who built the theater. And he wrote the letter to the Township Committee. So I'll read it. My grand uncle, William E. Lehman, and my papa, David J. Lehman, Will's younger brother, were responsible for some great theater designs in our country. It is my best assumption that they put their heart and soul into creating a solution that would stand forever for people to enjoy history of the arts. Their strength in the perimeter wall construction and its structural frame, along with their unique entrances and ticket booths, were second to none. The interior layouts and fascinating ceiling dome design, detail, and artwork were simply breathtaking. Besides the Maplewood Theater, the original Count Basie Theater and the Brooks Arts Center, to name just a couple, were clear architectural examples of my family's theatrical designs. The Carlton Theater, as it was originally named, was opened in 1926 in neoclassical revival architectural style. The name was later changed to the Count Basie Center for the Arts Red Bank in Monmouth County. Similarly, the Brooks Arts Center, located at 10 Hamilton Street, Bound Brook, New Jersey, also went through extensive restoration after many years of flooding. It stands tall today with so many enjoyable performances there. All types of development are important today to allow progress to continue. However, these historic buildings, which are generally not duplicated today in their detail, should be protected so that all generations to come shall have the opportunity to share with their families history no different than the history behind the Great Pyramids or any building of such magnificent historical meaning. I hope to be able to take my grandchildren to visit the Maplewood Theater and others, not only to share our family connection, but to explain how important it is to keep our art, architecture, and its beauty intact. I hope I will have this opportunity. Very truly yours, Thomas C. Lehman, Lehman Architecture Group, BC.
There was the perfect word about that, right? Well, because he's an actor. It's awesome.
My name is Gilma Sexer. I've lived in Maplewood for more than 40 years. And Inda Sexer. And what? INDA. SECHCER. I've lived in Maplewood for more than 40 years, and I am an architect with a focus on historic preservation. A few comments. You mentioned no greater than 60 units per acre. The Claris building is less than 40 units per acre. When we're talking about 60, we're talking about the huge Avalon buildings on the other side of town, not at a tiny little unusual unique general village. As well, the historic master plan affordable housing element allows for specifically 100 units per acre, 100 units on that land in that redevelopment. So it is written into the affordable housing master plan for 100 units on the site, number one. Number two, in the presentation tonight, I was surprised to see your statement about the bank and the theater. First of all, this project should not just be called the theater building. It's the entire block. It's not just the theater redevelopment. It is the entire block. Specifically, the anchors are the historic bank building and the historic theater building. The prior draft of this plan stated that the bank building, the historic bank building, should remain and be reused as either bank or another adaptive reuse on that site. In that prior draft, it allowed for complete demolition of the theater building. I wrote extensive notes a number of times to you all, to the Township Committee, the Planning Board, and to the planners. I think it was 11 pages of comments each time, that it did not include retention of the theater building. What I saw tonight on your slides, unless I was greatly mistaken, was a statement that allowed, specifically it said the bank and theater facades. Retaining the facade of an historic building is, to say it unprofessionally, a totally bogus move. It means absolutely nothing. In my long career in architecture, I've only once seen the historic facade be reused in an appropriate and meaningful fashion. To retain the facades and just use them as basically as appliques on a new building, I can't even think of the words for it. It just does not work. So in your new plan that you presented tonight, the words specifically said bank and theater facades. That's a negative change because the last draft at least said retain the bank building in its entirety, including the vault and other historic elements inside. You must change this plan to, just like the bank, require the Maplewood Theater building to be retained and adaptively reused as a theater and or other uses. Thank you.
Jackson, and my husband wants to speak after me too. I'm a Maplewood Film Society, and I just want to read the comment that I had sent to them when they were first asking us to sign a petition. 11 years ago, when my husband and I first stepped out of the train station and onto Maplewood Avenue, the movie theater's iconic facade was the first Maplewood landmark that caught our eyes and our hearts. The fact that the town's main street had a movie theater and was also complemented by the excellent bookstore showed us immediately that this was a town that centered its sense of community around the arts. We decided this was a place we wanted to raise our family. And 11 years later, this message is more important, and I feel like it's needed more than ever. If this space is destroyed, it only feeds into the nightmare of the corporate greed that is overtaking the country right now. It would feel like a gut punch. It needs to be a multi-purpose space for movies, performances, and the arts. By saving the town's theater space, you'd be helping to save the soul of the small towns in the nation. It would be a wonderful example. Please save the space. Thank you.
My name is D. Jackson, D.D. Jackson, just D period. But I'm actually reading a statement by our daughter, son Jackson, who's a 16-year-old in high school, busy studying for her calculus test tomorrow, so she couldn't make it. So she gave me something to read. Son, S-U-N. So this is from her. She said, being a child in Maplewood was one of the best experiences I could ask for. Not just because of the old homey library or the Maple Leaf Diner, matzo ball soup, or number 165. These were all perks, of course. But the one thing that made everything magical, the cherry on top, was the Maplewood Theater. I can still close my eyes and remember the blue walls, funky carpets, and absolute brag when you rented out a movie for your birthday. While nowadays my friends and I go to Starbucks after school, everyone used to go see a movie. It was, without a doubt, the heart of Maplewood. I don't think I realized how much it meant until a random day in 2020, days after COVID, where, like many other stores, it read closed until further notice, stay safe. At the time, we all had to accept these changes. A global virus was enough of a fright. The occasional store temporarily closing down was the least of our concerns. But when everyone got vaccinated and we started reintroducing ourselves to our favorite cafes and bookstores, the Maplewood Theater would still have that sign, closed until further notice. I would find myself talking with friends about the disappearance of the theater. We would share our favorite memories, remembering the time when life was easier, and no matter what was going on, we could go right next door to our own theater, a 5-minute walk to meet up and radiate joy at a screen. Our town over the past couple of years has lacked the artistic diversity it once had. My brother, a sophomore in college, is a film student, and I am a musician. I can't guarantee that we would have had the exact same connection to the arts without the escape of the Maplewood Theater, providing us a constant haven of creativity. It kills me that some people are growing up in a Maplewood that is ripped away from an artistic community, away from the spirit of life and culture our town was once home to. At a time when censorship is more prevalent than ever, the arts and community are more relevant than ever. I sincerely hope that the theater comes back. I wasn't ready to lose the memories of it, and I want to make new ones with new community included. I hope one day the sign that is read closed until further notice for so many years can finally read open again.
Hi, I'm Mariah Steele. I've been a resident in Maplewood for 27 years, so before my first birthday. And the theater has been one of my favorite places to go, like every single time that I've had like time off. The first movie I watched there was The Mask in 2005, so I was only 7 years old, but I remember all the laughs and everything. And even if it's not a movie fondly looked upon, I'm like, I watched it in that theater. And that's the very first theater that I watched a movie in ever. And that makes it super special. And then the last movie that I ever watched, and it was in 2020, with the Sonic movie. And I'm like, well, I hear that things aren't going so well right now, but I hope that after this whole blows over, I can go into the theater and go and watch more awesome movies. But then it didn't happen, and I'm like, what are we gonna do now? And then I'm going to South Orange, and I'm like, okay, cool, it's still nearby, but then that closed down because Cinema Lab ended their sponsorship. So I'm like, well, we don't have anywhere nearby to just walk down to watch movies anymore, and I'm like, it's really sad. And I don't think it's just rose-colored glasses, but there really was more foot traffic when the theater was open and you could go and have a dinner afterwards or sit on the benches. It was just a really nice spot, and I would really love for it to come back.
My name is Jim Nathanson, 44 years of Maplewood. I was on the planning board for 13 years, from 2005 to 2018, and vice chair for about 7 of those years. I have some concerns about the plan that don't relate to the theater issues, although I respect them. I'm kind of agnostic on the theater issues. I talked to Angela about this. I believe the market will determine what's feasible, so I hope it works out. My concerns are twofold. One is about the transit orientation and the other is affordable housing. By way of background, I am on the real estate advisory committee for the Elizabeth Coalition of House the Homeless, and my son makes a living doing financing for affordable housing. So I'm very deeply sympathetic and familiar with those issues. So that said, this background, I have heard that multifamily housing up to 100 units might be contemplated for this site. I believe the township committee will be motivated to maximize the number of units because the township committee has committed to providing 200 units of affordable housing over the next 10 years, which at 20% set aside implies 1,000 new units of multifamily housing in Maplewood. It's not time to debate the feasibility of that. I only point out that I believe the township committee will be motivated to maximize the number of units. And just like the Paris across the street, I think that's about 25 units. So if you think about something that has 50, 60, 70, up to 100 units, the mass of that building is something to concern. So something for the township committee and the planning board to think seriously about. Secondly, the transit orientation, and we all appreciate Maplewood's on the train line. You can get easily to Morristown, or to Orange, or to Newark, or to New York. So the transit reality for Maplewood is real, but the other side of the reality is that you can't take mass transit to Target or Home Depot. You can't get to Livingston, if you have a job in Livingston. You can't get there on a bus. I checked some bus routes. It's an hour and a half to get to Livingston from Maplewood. You can't get to Linden or yourself if you have a job there. It's an hour and a half. So the reality is, whether we like it or not, cars are a reality. This plan provides for a maximum of 1 car per residential unit. We can debate how feasible that is, but I want you to think about, given the size, the potential size of the residential units, how many cars, maybe it's not 100, maybe it's 50, maybe it's 60, but they're all going to pour out into Inwood Place or Woodland Road. And so that's a lot of cars in a very congested area, and they will pour on either up Woodland Road to Ridgewood or onto Durant. Full disclosure, I live in Durant. So I might be a little concerned about 50 or 60 cars at peak hours trying to get in and out of that space. So again, those are my concerns. It's the mass of the building, given our obligation to provide affordable housing, which I'm sympathetic to. But I think in this space, we have to be concerned about it. And then the related transit issues. So those are my comments.
With the hope that the planning board, I will argue with a couple points. One being that the affordable housing units are court mandated. And they don't all have to be 20% set aside. We are looking at trying to obtain property to do 100% affordable. So some of what you said is true. I also take issue with the characterization that 60 cars are going to pour out all at once on Inwood. That's just me. So, did you want to say anything, Paul?
Those are the 2 points I was actually going to address. Just with affordable housing, just so everyone's aware, right now, all municipalities with filed plans are in the midst of dealing with challenges to the housing elements fair share plans they adopted. So the next few months will give clarity, we all hope, but it's literally a law, just real quick divergence from this topic, a law that came into place last year that set timelines for this whole process. So hopefully, by the time the township committee is ready to move forward with the development plan, there'll be a little more direction from Trenton, from the program that's dictating affordable housing.
Thank you. Fred?
My name is Fred Profeta, 1 Hickory Drive. I'm former president of the Maplewood Redevelopment Planning Board and former mayor. I won't repeat the comments about the theater. I lived in that theater. Everybody has spoken eloquently about it. I'm thoroughly cool with that side. Most of what I have to say deals with the language of the plan itself. Some things I think are not clear, some things I think are contradictory. And I just want to bring them to your attention. I think an important aspect of this plan relates to the issue of demolition, which you have delegated, as you should, to the Maplewood clients, which says no building shall be demolished in Maplewood Village without the approval of the clients. And that's been there for many years, since the very beginning. But there's no definition of demolition in the Village Alliance documents. And you haven't defined it in your development plan. So, and that's it fits on certain things with the Alliance. But it's not being approved by this redevelopment plan. I mean, for example, what does demolition of a building mean? You have to take down the whole thing, or at least part of it, or a large part of it, demolition? What if a developer said, all right, we're taking down the whole back of the Maplewood Theater? Is that now a demolition of that building, which has to go before the Village Alliance? I mean, this is litigation making, this sort of stuff. We don't need that. So I think that should be clear. I mean, you could also say that bank buildings should not be demolished, but you also allow for them to take out the entire interior. Well, okay, so is that a demolition? It has to be approved by the Village Alliance. It isn't set. So that's an uncertainty that I don't think we need. And I think it's a very important topic. You also say that well, the plan requires preservation of certain facades, and that appears on page 8 of the plan. Requires preservation. And then you say, notably, those of the bank and the theater building. Well, if it's notably those, what other ones are you talking about? It's not clear. You could have just said the bank and the theater building, but you said notably, so I'm assuming that you have other ones in mind also. But the plan says nothing about it, so it's vague. And finally, on the issue which my good friend Jim Nathan addressed regarding the planning, parking. On page 19, you say parking shall reasonably serve all uses. Well, I don't see any criteria for that. What's reasonable service for all uses? And then you go on to say there's no minimum requirement for non-residential uses. Well, that's a use. They're saying there's none there. But they also say it shall reasonably serve all uses. I mean, this kind of uncertainty on an issue is important as parking in Maplewood Village is something that we don't.
Thank you.
What the parking requirement for non-residential in the village right now is 0. So if you open a restaurant, you're not required to provide parking because all the parking is public, right? So that would be an unreasonable demand on somebody trying to open a business. You want to address a couple of things like the demolition definition and
At this point, I think it's feedback that we'll take, at least take a look at. I don't want to sit here on the fly and try to address the details of the language. There's a lot of pages in there, a lot of information. So that's why we're doing this. We're not rushing it. So it's been taken down by the recorder, and instead of trying to come back with a definitive answer now, I prefer not to. But
if clarity is needed in this zoning document, then clarity will be provided, but thanks for that. I gotta go this way, I got told I have to look this way and not. No.
Hi, my name is Dallas Steele. I'm a Maplewood resident for 4 years now, and I'm also the founder of Soma Stage, which is a local nonprofit theater company that is based right here in Maplewood. My family moved here because this is an arts town. That's why we chose Maplewood. We're a theater family. My husband's a Broadway actor. I'm a producer, and this is why we chose to move here. This is why I started Soma Stage as well, and to embrace the arts in this community. And we have been so embraced by this local community. Just last week, we had our Broadway in the Park event right here in Memorial Park, and we had 5,000 people come out to support us. And it wasn't just the local Maplewood and South Orange residents. We had people come from all over New Jersey. We had people come from New York. We had people from all over coming to our community for this event to support the arts. And we have established a reputation as being an arts community and an arts town. And I think that's something that is really important to uphold. And for me, I just want to echo everybody else in saying the importance of the requirement of having some type of arts center being kept within the theater building. You know, my dream would be to have like a multi-use art space where we have, you know, we're not just relying on a movie theater, but we have a movie theater, we have potentially a black box theater, we have a rehearsal space, a rental space where different tenants can join together to help make that space feasible, including my nonprofit Soma Stage. We would love to be a tenant in that building and be, you know, have a space right here in the middle of the community. And so I just wanted to stress as well the importance of that requirement within the building, and just seeing how many people came to visit our community for the arts, and that having a space like that within our community will only bring more and more people to our community, to our businesses, to the restaurants. And so I just wanted to stress that as well. Thank you.
Rehash the question, Mr. Profeta, just on one issue, the bank zone, the preservation. I want to make sure it's clear what's at least in the plan currently. So I do want to read briefly into the record what's on page 16 here. The original Maplewood Bank and Trust Company building on lot 173 shall not be demolished. Talk about that, how that's defined. The redeveloper of the historic bank building shall, that's must, preserve the engraved signage which states the Maplewood Bank and Trust Co. on the front facade and the interior bank vault, and repair and preserve any other original features on the facade. So it's a bit more specific than what's been made out to be, but the idea was to leave some flexibility for other types of uses, whether it's restaurants, other retail, other types of users that occupy it. But again, the point's taken, I'm not going to give you a definitive answer, but the plan currently at least has some very specific language on the bank.
Good evening.
And I am resident Linda Kingsbury. Kiambury. And I've been a resident here for 51 years. And when I moved here, Maplewood was a village. And we moved here for that reason. You knew everyone in town, you knew the people who had the storerooms. The storerooms knew the children. They couldn't get in trouble because somebody was going to tell them. Okay? And what's happened to our community, aside from not having any parking, because I live all over the place. So I had an impact of no parking. I can't park in front of my house or actually park in front of our house. If you come in, because merchants are allowed to park there, okay? And people around us are can't park. So you're no longer living in what was a village, and I understand that things have to move forward. But if you don't have a destination, the movie theater, what's going to support the restaurants? And if people can't, I mean, local residents can't be there to eat all of these restaurants every week. We have to have that account. If we have no parking, what are they going to do? Then I'm not going to do my thing. So, you know, we have to seriously look at these alternative types of parking or a jetty that where there's a parking spot outside of him that can allow people to come and have dinner or park for the day instead of parking all day for the transit. You know, it's something to seriously consider, but parking is definitely one of the biggest problems we see right now.
So parking is an issue, yeah, for sure, in every downtown, honestly. As a downtown management person for 30 years, I can attest to that. The only bad issue with parking is if there's nobody parking there because there's nothing to come to.
My name is Peter Steck. I live on Maplewood Avenue. And what is troublesome about the plan is the height. It allows 55 feet, and you can put a 10-foot elevator override on top. That's a 5-story building. Now, developers like that because you can build 4-story stick-built over a concrete platform. You see it all over the place. But that's out of character with the village. And the plan's response is, well, don't worry, we're going to set it back to 20 feet, the upper stories. Well, that works when you're in a canyon of buildings, but as you know, there's a train station in Brickleton Square, so that view is the long view. You're going to see a 5-story building there. Now, you'll say, Mr. Steck, if we cut off the stories, we're going to lessen the economic potential of a redeveloper. Well, the whole purpose of this is to eliminate blight. And blight is something that is spreading, destroying the area. I've been walking up and down Maplewood Avenue for 35 years. I think I'm walking too fast, but I can't find any blight.
I will just say that when the redevelopment law was initially passed in the state of New Jersey, as you well know, the planner, right, that blight was in the definition for declaring an area in need of redevelopment, and that hasn't been the case for 10, 15, 20 years, a while. So it's not about blight. It's not about blight. It's not. I just don't want you to put something out there that's not true. No, I'm not.
There's a court case that says an area, it is established that an area in need of redevelopment is identical to blight as defined in the New Jersey Constitution.
I would like to say, I didn't want to delve into court cases and legalese here, so I'm trying not to do that tonight, but the I'll say this, the clear reality, Mr. Speck's a planner like myself who practices throughout the state. The redevelopment law has been applied in numerous communities, both urban, suburban, and otherwise, rural as well, such as Highbridge and other places, to provide for redevelopment that goes beyond just eliminating blight. It's an economic development tool, it's a tool for controlling development and developers, and for providing for community benefits in exchange for new uses and buildings. So again, we don't have to agree on, again, whether it is a case that talks about that specific issue. It's a tool that goes well beyond the original meaning of the statute.
Hello, everybody. My name is Amy Alonso, and I'm a filmmaker. I am also an actor, and I run a public access television station here in New Jersey. By the way, Maplewood doesn't have one, in case you didn't know. So, of course, I am in support of the theater staying, and I am in support of having space, have movies and performances and things like that. But I think that there's a reality that we're not talking about, that somehow we need to all get together and put our thinking caps on, is how are we going to pay for this? Because everybody's very nostalgic about keeping the theater, let's keep the theater. But the reality is that the owner of the theater doesn't care. It doesn't seem like they care. So it's going to take all of us getting together, forming other kinds of meetings to figure out how are we going to do this? Can we get grants? Can we get donations? What about all the famous people that came from New Jersey? Famous people that came from Maplewood that perhaps may be able to support us so that we can make it a reality to keep this theater. And interestingly enough, I've been reading a lot of history about the Maplewood Theater, and they had the same issues way back when. There's an article that you can look up. Same things, same issues. But I think that what we can do today is to go forward and to actually put our money where our mouth is and get together and really sit down and try to get the money to make this happen. Because it's very important to this town to have this theater. We've been here for about 26 years, and even before we lived in Maplewood, we would come to the Maplewood Theater, and that was part of the reason why we purchased our home here. So many people have said that. So let's get together, let's make it happen, and let's not wait. Let's do it now.
Linda Jacobs, I'm a 30-year resident of Maplewood. Paul, you laid out what needs to happen in terms of the adoption of the redevelopment plan, but what I missed, and maybe you explained it too quickly for me, was how do we adopt it? I feel the urgency to get this program on the road, and I think a lot of other people here too. There's a concern about seeing an empty storefront, seeing the theater, the potential for blight. I don't think we have anything, but the potential as things stay the way they are. So if the township committee holds this public hearing and all this great stuff with all the different language, which I was kind of hoping we were a little closer to than before I came to the meeting tonight. But what is the, can you briefly tell us what is the process for the township to adopt the redevelopment plan after the public hearing? So we could get some sense of the timeline, because if we don't have this in place, what I'm understanding today is that puts us at a disadvantage in terms of the township of any potential negotiation with future redevelopers.
Sure, I'd be happy to. Thank you for the question. So the process, again, is spelled out in that local redevelopment and housing law that the state has. And it's essentially from here, the redevelopment plan can be either introduced and come from the planning board and be sent to the township committee, or the township committee can introduce it as an ordinance, as a full document. Right now, as it's written, as it's amended, however it wants, it has to go to both entities. For whatever reason, the law is a little weird that you can go either way, but it has to go through one introduction as an ordinance, like any other law, by the township committee, and then a second reading and public hearing that's duly noticed to the public, obviously property owners and others. And either before or in between that process, the planning board statutorily has to review it, or it's given the opportunity to review it, I should say, it has 45 days to review it for consistency with the master plan and any other recommendations the planning board has. So that's a relatively tight timeframe. If you want to move it, if it wants to move quickly, it can, as long as the notice isn't met for doing the adoption of the ordinance. That is the critical step, though, to doing anything beyond that when we talk about designating redevelopers, entering into agreements. Again, if there was a desire for tax abatements or anything else, that can't be done until the adoption of that ordinance and plan. So I don't know if I made that more or less clear, but it's essentially a very straightforward introduction, planning board, and township committee second reading, or a different way of doing it, but essentially it has to hit all those check all those boxes along the way. So it's a matter of a couple months if and when it's time to do that. It's not another 6 months or a year unless there's a desire for more comment or its conditions change or something else. But you're welcome.
Hi, my name is Daniel Wright. I serve as the chair of the Maplewood Historic Preservation Commission. First, I want to thank the township for clarifying the HPC's advisory role in the redevelopment process in the latest draft of the plan. The authority assigned to the HPC in the redevelopment plan is to advise the planning board in decisions that the planning board makes. We'll give it our best effort, especially knowing how deeply the community cares about seeing preservation reflected in the redevelopment plan. The buildings identified within the redevelopment area, especially the Maplewood Bank and Trust Building, the Maplewood Theater, and the Bergdorf Center, are historically significant to the Maplewood Village Historic District, which has been listed on the state and national historic registers. These are not just individual structures, they are defining features of the village, which residents cherish for its quaintness, walkability, and diversity of small, locally owned businesses. A commercial center not located on a thoroughfare where generations of our young people could safely take their first steps of independence. The architectural texture and human scale charm of the village are essential to what makes Maplewood unique. The theater in particular has long served as both a cultural anchor and an architectural landmark within that context. This community sentiment was reaffirmed in the Commission's recent Preservation Element Survey, which gathered public input on preservation priorities across Maplewood. Several key themes emerged that are highly relevant to this discussion, and I read every piece of feedback that people submitted. But some of the themes: a strong desire to retain the historic character of the village with emphasis on architectural details, building scale, and facades. Broad support for adaptive reuse, bringing new life to historic buildings without erasing their unique identities. And widespread recognition of the Maplewood Theater as a building worthy of sensitive and respectful treatment in any future redevelopment. As discussions progressed, the Historic Preservation Commission remains committed to elevating these community values and ensuring that preservation goals are meaningfully considered. We all want to see the village continue to thrive, but that must include protecting the very qualities that make it unique and led to it being so beloved by residents and visitors alike. Thank you again for your time and for your ongoing collaboration, the township, the residents, in shaping a thoughtful future for this end of Maplewood Village.
Is there anyone else who would like to make a comment or question? And I'll put that over there.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Neil Master. I've been a resident of Maplewood for 4 years, along with my wife and my 2 small kids. And I'm here thanks to the Maplewood Film Society, who have done a great job organizing, I think, what is kind of all of energy around this topic into something that we can bring here and show that energy, in person. And I want to really address the town council today in my comments. I moved to Maplewood 4 years ago, and like many people, I moved here for 2 reasons. I moved here because it's an arts town, and I moved here because it's a true community. Unlike some of the other folks here, I'm not in the arts. I'm a corporate executive. I'm a YIMBY. I believe in growth and development. I think this town can grow and grow smartly. But I'm also a parent of 2 little kids, and someone who loves the arts, and someone who cares about community. And I do think that in this country, we are in a crisis of community. Community is evaporating everywhere you look. And that's because community needs an ecosystem, it needs a habitat, right? And that is something that's in the built environment. It's not just something that comes out of nowhere. And Maplewood has proven to me, just in 4 years living here, that there is a way to buck the crisis of community. This town isn't like other towns. I've met people who moved and moved back because when they left, they landed in a place that was alienated, that just didn't have that community coursing through it, right? That's a delicate thing. It has to be protected. Maplewood, in so many ways, proves that if you build it, they will come. Look at Maplewood stuff. Look at the kids, not even being able to get a seat at Broadway in the Park the other day. It was insane. And what it tells me is we have to create a habitat for the arts, because that creates a habitat for community. And before I came, I was talking to my daughter, who's in her first year at Maplewood Middle, and she was just imagining being able to walk to the theater at the end of the school day, right? And it sounds like there are many, many kids who grew up with that opportunity, and I know it's a leap of faith to the council. It's a leap of faith, right? To say this should be a requirement instead of letting the market decide. But I will also say that sometimes you need to take a leap of faith, and based on all of my experiences in Maplewood, I think this is a short leap. So please take that into consideration next week.
Joe, W-I-G-H-T-L-A-N, but 1959. There you go. Oh, you asked the BBC about the status of the building, and then what exactly is going on? Do you have any more detail on that? No. I heard it just happened this week.
No, there was a sale, a contract for purchase. Yeah, and that did not close and fell apart yet. So as far as I know, the private property owner of the building is looking for either tenant or purchaser.
To me, that's critical because I owned a business for 20 years and I was in government for 20 years almost. And the bottom line is, I don't envy you at all. The reality, is what they say, no good deed goes unpunished. But the reality is, unless you get somebody in there with economic business viability, then you're going to have life. Right? You're not having a tenant that's able to do what you love, which I think ideally would be a movie theater, if that's my personal opinion. But how are we going to raise money or raise awareness to get somebody able to do that? I mean, are we going to hire some brokers? I don't know. Way out of my pay grade. But the reality is, unless you have somebody in there who can pay the rent and afford to put in the movies and so on and so forth, you'll have to get future money. So I think that's maybe the thing, and that's not your job. Thank God for you. But the reality is, somebody saying we have a group to look at. Well, would there be a committee to do that? I wouldn't be on it because I'm not out of my mind. But the reality is, you got to get somebody in there that can do it. And soon.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Felice Longa. I live at 67 Goodland. I've been since 26 years now. And I actually moved here going to Manhattan because my realtor showed up late and said, "Oh,
walking on the porch. And truthfully, I fell in love with the porch, not the house, don't give us anything. But I have one question that I never heard. Is the movie theater available for purchase as a separate building? And if so, how much is it?
We've asked the same question. The owner of the building doesn't have to tell us what his asking price is. It's in his private negotiations. I've heard a wide range of prices. So, yeah.
Hi, my name is Joe Gonzalez. I've been living in Maplewood for about 15 years. I want to make a point about how it seems like there's questions about whether a movie theater can be financially viable in the town and within, maybe the confines of our existing structure. Doesn't matter. There are a lot of examples, Montclair being one of them, but there's tons of them in Manhattan, in other towns where we know movie theaters can survive, either as nonprofits, indie films. I know there's a lot of opportunities here. I think someone said if we, build it or if we imagine it, they will come. If we say we want some of this development, I don't know how much, I don't know if it's the old building or maybe it's a new movie theater, whatever it is, to be devoted to some kind of theater, art, film center, it will do well. There will be money. People will want to do it. I don't know if it's going to be the Maplewood Film Society or someone else that rents the space, for example. All of these ideas are possible. But we all want there to be a space. The movie theater that's there and that was there represents so much more than just the building. I know the architecture is very important too. But the movie theater stands for a lot more. It's entertainment, it's young teenagers. I have a 13-year-old son. He loves movies. He likes to go out. He'll go to that. If I say there's a great classic film, Back to the Future, right? Which was huge for me when I was young, right? Go watch it. It's playing at the movie theater down in Maplewood. So I think, there is some speculation, some criticism about movie theaters and the business. It can be successful. We want it, we will make it successful.
Hi, I'm Carol Cornicelli, C-O-R-N-I-C-E. And I work with the Maplewood Strollers. We've been around since 1932. So there is theater alive in Maplewood, around the corner. Oh, no, that way. Anyway, I just want to point out, first of all, that the movie theater was a legitimate theater first. It was a theater before it was a movie theater. I don't know what it looks like. I'm sure I would love to see pictures. I don't know if the Circle Society has any interior pictures. Yeah, I would love to see, because that's what I would like to see, what's left of, I don't know what's behind the walls of the movie theater. But, and of course, I obviously support the idea of having another theater, a multi-use space, because the Bergdorf is maxed out. We already have 2 groups in there, and other people who rent the space who need theater. We could absolutely use another space for programming for kids and for adults and everybody else and in between. So I'm just throwing my hat in that ring. So, and Film Society, I want to talk to you later. Thank you.
Okay, we'll take a few more questions. Already, wait, 8. I want to see if anybody who hasn't spoken yet. Is there anyone who hasn't asked or said anything who would like to speak? Gotta divvy it up.
Hi, my name is Joan Delaloy, D-E-L-A-L-O-Y-E. I just have a basic question. I'm not clear on how many owners there are of all of these properties, and I wondered if you could talk a little bit about that.
Sure. All the properties in it, I think 176 is an owner, 1
175 is another owner, as is 174 and 173. What's 175? Oh, that's us.
5 owners, 4 private, 1 township.
Right.
Two lots that are owned by Maplewood, the other, I don't know, point here, but
Yeah.
you can picture the bank, the theater.
The bank and the property, the parking lot behind the bank, that's all, that whole 173 is one owner. 174 is the grocery store, that's one owner. 175 is the movie theater, that's one owner. 176 is Donnie Ramen, and that's one owner. And then that's the Bergdorf Center, which is ours, as is the parking lot number, the 175. There? Okay. Anyone else who hasn't spoken yet would like to speak? I thought I saw him, yeah.
Thank you. It's Jeff Adamson, Geoff. I just had a question for you, the planner. So from what you were saying as a historical architect, if I got it correctly, there was a change in the restrictions that you were putting on here since the last meetings that I was at. And I just wanted to get clarified on what that was. That was the first question. And the second question is, as I understand now, you basically preserved most of the bank under your restricted proposal, but not the movie theater. And so the question was, you could do this, and that would be something that you could decide to do, yes or no, to restrict, you restricted you're banning the demolition of the bank building, but you are not banning the demolition of your theater, but could you?
Okay, so the first thing is, it's not me. I know you're saying you, I think you mean universally. I'm writing the plans as a technician for the township committee and the whole community. So I don't make unilateral decisions. That said, the language right now with regard to the theater is to require the preservation of the front 2-story portion where the storefronts are and the upper floor uses facing the street. That's how it's currently written. It does not talk about requiring the preservation of the entire building. That could it be legally done? Yes. There's the reality that we're dealing with here, and I've been tasked with trying to balance not having an end user, not having a film society with millions of dollars to spend that's guaranteeing its preservation, but making sure we're trying to prioritize the most visible portions. Now, if the township committee listens to what everyone says tonight and changes their mind and wants to write it differently, that's possible. The other
What was the other part of the question?
Oh, in the bank building?
The bank.
The changes, I think, were mischaracterized. I had a very quick summary up there. The language is essentially intact. There were some modifications based on HPC feedback. Again, without looking at a redline version, I can't sit here and tell you, but both documents are available online, so I wish I could sit here and tell you right off the top of my head. I can't. I know that we did not go taking out language to make it overly easier to demolish anything or modify the bank. That was not the intention. I don't recall making any changes along those lines.
Yeah, and the interior of the bank is not required to, right? Whatever the interior is, marble or anything, it's not required to remain.
Right.
It's the exterior.
And well, the vault is actually.
And the vault.
Yes. Yeah, again, the idea being here, since there's no end user, developer in mind, we need to leave a little more flexibility. This can be refined. Other redevelopments, Maplewood's done it, other plans elsewhere, can be modified to tighten it up a bit. And if you have someone that, again, outpouring of support comes from the theater group, and you have someone that walks up to the township committee and says, we can do this, that's something that certainly can be changed down the road. But to do it now without that type of entity, I think, unfortunately, is just not good to be realistic. You can't just zone something and hope it's going to happen.
True. Okay, I'll give 2 more. One. Sorry.
Hi, I'm Rachel Menka. I'm a bit of Live in the Hurt Road. I just had a question. I
negotiating against? Are we, like, it kind of sounds like we're negotiating against ourselves a little bit. Have we tried saying we want it all and then left it and it's not been sold? Or why have we not asked for everything that we want and then wait to see what happens?
I think the best way to answer this, my firm's been working in Maplewood for a number of years. I've been doing this for 25 plus years. I mean, we've been asked to provide our experience in these types of projects. And the reality is it's difficult to just say, with private property, you have to do only one thing, especially in an area where you have, again, the reality is a use that has had trouble maintaining itself or staying in place. So the idea was to provide for parameters to allow for it and to try to be very strict about certain aspects of preservation and other parts of it. But if we were to just do, let's say, only one thing, well, again, legally, sure, that can be done. It was based on my experience, my firm's experience doing this, not to tie, just to get to one very limited position with regard to the future redevelopment.
I think Rachel, that it might be more possible if we own the building, but we don't. If anybody tried to tell me that I couldn't have, I couldn't live in my house anymore, they just changed the zoning and said, it's not for residential anymore. These are the kinds of things that there are laws that protect private property, and this is private property. So, as Paul just said, we're putting in uses that will make it the easiest for someone who buys the property or rents the property to do especially what you want. But I would urge, as someone else said earlier, the Film Society, since the government can't really do it, we're not going to go raise $6, $8, $10 million to do this, but Godspeed. I would love that to happen. I don't think anyone would fight it, but there are realities that we can. Just like in Montclair, somebody said, we'll donate the building, but you can restrict it as a movie theater. I don't think we'd have much problem doing that. So I'll leave it one more. Angela, you want to say something? Oh.
Hello, I'm Max Kravitz. I'm a member of the Maplewood Arts Council. I am here today to read a message from Lisa Cohen, another member of the Maplewood Arts Council, which is one of the municipal boards and committees under the Township Committee, specifically focusing on the arts and culture here in Maplewood. Real quick. So this is from Lisa Cohen, co-founder of also the Maplewood Film Society. Now is the time for Maplewood to come together and decide what kind of town we want to be. Do we honor the tradition of the movie-going experience right here in the heart of our village, across from the train, or do we turn our backs on it? Especially now, as New Jersey emerges as a hub for filmmaking, our town should seize that opportunity to preserve and grow that cultural legacy. Look at Montclair, the Bellevue Theater, opened in 1922 and served as a community anchor for 95 years. When it closed, residents rallied, and in 2022, the redevelopment plan mandated that 50% of the floor plan be dedicated to a theater. If Montclair can state that so boldly, so can we. Read the comments on the petition, listen to the community. People are asking for a theater and community space in the 2 acres slated for redevelopment. Let's not miss this chance to shape our town's future.
Thoughts you want to make sure get heard tonight?
No, I think at this point, I would reiterate, there's a process that needs to be followed. We are still a number of steps away. I know there's some people who like to move really quickly to move this forward, others that maybe would like to find more time for reasons of fundraising or other types of things. The reality is what we're trying to do is at least focus the comments that I've received. We're going to take into account everything that was mentioned tonight, anything else that's been sent in recently, anything else that was sent in before, and then work with the Township Committee, and in particular the SEED, the and entrepreneurship, economic development to try to finalize what will be in the draft plan, and then to start that process, whether it's a few weeks out or, hopefully in the near future, to at least get that process going with the planning board's involvement, township committee taking its actions, to then hopefully adopt a plan, because then you can take your next steps to move forward with more specifics of the redevelopment project. With that, I think.
Wait. I tried to give you the mic before, you just didn't know. It's the last chance.
It's just like an honest question, okay? Why do we have this plan? Like, it's a 2-acre area owned by all these different people that includes these historic mixed-use buildings. Most of the people here are caring about the specific building of the theater, but there are other valid concerns about parking, about housing. It seems like we're trying to do too much, and it seems to the outsiders that this plan was written for a developer who owned the bank building and was trying to buy the theater. That's not happening anymore. Can't we just toss this baby out and do something better? Like, what's preventing that?
Angela, no offense, but that's a second sort of, we're not being transparent, we have something, I take offense to that because that's not what's going on, sorry. I'm just being honest with you. Anybody who knows me well knows I say what I think, and this is what I think. So I'm not taking it anymore, the mic's mine, and I'm just closing this meeting in a second, but this is a zoning document that dictates what can be done in this block area. What it does allow the township to do, which you should be happy about, is to require certain things. If you had $8 million, we could easily require a movie theater on this space, and I think we could get support for that potentially. But I don't see that coming to the table. So if that comes to the table, we've got a few months that we'll be going through this redevelopment plan. And like I said, it's a plan, and as Paul said before, it's not written in stone. It can, like any other ordinance, any other zoning ordinance, be amended. But to suggest that we're not being transparent or that this was written for a developer, which it was not, that it's just flatly, offensive to the 5 of us who serve on the governing body. So with that, I will thank you all for coming, and stay tuned. We're not done.